How's it going, guys? July-August manga haul, in the words of Mr. Fred from Fred Hall's Direct Editions. Are you ready? Alright, let's do this. I'm probably not ready though. So I'm starting off with the hardcover. That would be Yukito Kishiro's Battle Angel Alita, Volume 4. The deluxe edition by Kodansha Comics. Very nice edition. And when you think of cyberpunk, I would say Alita is a perfect example of cyberpunk. I do wonder what the deal is with the Frank Miller ninjas though. Moving on, another hardcover. This is Leiji Matsumoto's Captain Harlock, the Classic Collection 1. It is by Seven Seas. I don't think I've ever seen a hardcover from Seven Seas, but this was it was a pretty good edition. The paper quality is not glossy like in the Alita one, and I really enjoyed the story on Captain Harlock. If you enjoyed Queen Emeralda's, I don't see why you won't enjoy Captain Harlock. So next I have Colosseum. This is volume 2 with the crazy covers. I have to commend the cover designer for the book. Yasushi Baba is doing some weird, crazy stuff. It was a lot more enjoyable than the first volume. It has probably the same amount of text, but it centers more on the action now. Although I did spend a lot of time trying to research all of the characters, because he does try to reference a lot of do homages on wrestlers, MMA fighters, martial arts fighters. I mean, you have people going back historically. I would suggest not to do the research like I try to do. Just read the book and enjoy it. Next I have the Troublemakers by Baron Yoshimoto. I did not realize the local Barnes & Noble had this in stock. Haven't read anything from Yoshimoto. He was a Gekiga artist during the 60s and 70s, I'm guessing. And as the title says, it's about a bunch of troublemakers. People in the fringe of society and stuff like that. There's a story here about this guy. He's a painter. Starts off with him, well, he's not a painter, but that's one of his hobbies. But he usually spends time by the seashore doing paintings of the ocean. And I really enjoyed it. He uses the palette knife to apply some of the paint. I remember when I used to do that. The last story is about a soldier, an African American soldier, who is basically looked down upon by everyone. And I'm not sure why he chose this art style. It's very different from the other stories, but I think they were all pretty enjoyable. If you like short story collections, if you like Gekiga, I would hunt down the Troublemakers. Up next, I got the last volume of Moteki by Mitsuru Kubo. And what can I say? The story kind of fizzled out for me at the end. But then I'm wondering if that's what the whole meaning of the story was. Do we put too much emphasis on our romantic relationships, and in the end we realize that we shouldn't get too overly dramatic about them? I did like that he did a small homage to Motofumi Kobayashi in some of the backgrounds, where Fujimoto was having one of his fits. I move on to an impulse buy. That is Star Wars Lost Stars by Yusaku Komiyama. She adapts a novel by Claudia Gray, first volume from Yen Press. And you might know Komiyama if you've seen a couple of my other videos. She did an Avengers manga where she took the movie Avengers and she put them against a bunch of zombies. But now she's adapting Lost Star, which follows these two characters, and it takes place during the first Star Wars movie. Not the first. If you know Star Wars, the first one that came out, right? Yeah, that movie with Luke and Leia. And so we follow these characters. The whole story was watching them growing up. They join the Empire, and then of course the boy sort of falls out of illusion with the Empire and decides to become a rebel. That was just this first volume. I'm not sure where the novel takes it or how far it goes, but it throws in a lot of the movie characters, but otherwise you're following their story. So next I have a Cutie Honey Go Go, and this is another book I wasn't sure I would pick up. This is by Shinpei Ito, which adapts the classic character by Go Nagai. And this is actually kind of a movie adaptation prequel, the live action movie that was directed by Hideki Anno. That's why he's credited here as part of the planner. Sadly, the story was never complete, but I have to say this was a lot of fun. It was a great read. You see Cutie Honey doing a bunch of Cutie Honey stuff, and I think the best part was that Ito reminded me so much of Kenichi Sonoda. The art, just the way he draws the characters, the way he draws automobiles, guns, everything reminded me so much of Gunsmith Cats or anything by Sonoda that I thought it was pretty cool. Story was never complete. He ends the manga. He kind of had to rush it. Nonetheless, I was very happy with the story and of course the art overall. I continue with Seven Seas. I have another Go Nagai adaptation. This is Devilman vs. Hades, Volume 2. This adaptation is by T. Moon. And I think this is a very art-driven story. It's just some very cool looking stuff. I was very happy to see that we finally got to see some Mazinger in here. Great Mazinger. And I believe the third volume, which ends the series, is going to be the big showdown with Devilman and Mazinger or Hades or all of them at the same time. I don't know. It's like a very Go Nagai driven haul, doesn't it? Because here we have Get a Robo Devolution, the last 3 minutes of the universe. This is volume 1. This, of course, is an adaptation. While it's more of a reinterpretation by Eiichi Shimizu and Tomohiro Shimoguchi, and you might know them because they are doing Ultraman, which is published by Viz. And what can I say? I enjoyed Ultraman a lot, but I have to say this was an even better start to a series. It takes 3 stories, which are the main pilots of this robot getting recruited by our mad scientist guy that is going to recruit everyone to save the world. And it does it in a non-chronological order. So the first guy that gets drafted to pilot the Get a Robo is the last story. No, the middle story. And the last guy that gets picked to be the pilot is the first story, which was, I thought, was kind of cool how they did the whole jumping around. But by the last chapter, of course, you go back to the beginning where the first chapter ended, and all the action starts, and robots fighting giant monsters, and you know how Get a Robo is. That was basically all the manga in English that I picked up for July and August. But I did manage to pick up 4 more volumes in Espanol. Feel free to head on out, or please continue joining me for the last 4 volumes here. And I'll start with an author you're probably most familiar with. That would be Shuzo Oshimi. I picked up Shino no es capaz de decir su propio nombre. This is a single volume. This is from Milky Way Editions, and this is just the dust jacket because I am currently reading Shino no es capaz de decir su propio nombre, which basically translates to Shino is incapable of saying her own name. This is without the dust jacket, which is how I usually read them. But I am basically over halfway, and I'm really enjoying it. It doesn't have the fantastic art that he does with Happiness, but this came right after Flowers of Evil, so if you've read Flowers of Evil, it's kind of more in that style. And it's basically about Shino, this girl that is very shy. She has a lot of anxiety problems, especially when it comes to speaking in public. So when she starts school and she tries to introduce herself, she just can't. She just can't get a word out. And I think that's where Oshimi excels in doing moments of awkwardness that just get under your skin. I think Crunchyroll has a couple of Shuzo Oshimi titles digitally. I've never used Crunchyroll to read manga, but if you can find more of Oshimi stuff legally, I guess that's a good deal. So I keep going with Milky Way Editions. This is Kuro by Somato, and I was watching a Spanish YouTuber doing a review and first impressions on this series. It's a 3-volume series about a girl and her cat living in a mansion, but there's some other weird stuff going on, which kind of, the cover back here ruins it. I think the most impressive part is that basically half of the manga is in color. Here's all our characters. Here's Kuro and the girl Coco, the owner of the cat. And the rest of the book is in black and white, as typical manga is. After reading this first volume, the first half, which is in color, was a webcomic which follows a storyline, and then what you get in the second half are short stories about the characters and about stuff that happens within the main story or before the main story, giving you a bit of background. I'm guessing that's the way it was collected. I move on to the last 2, and these last 2 are from a publisher that I have never tried before, and they do a lot of horror. Most of their catalog is Junji Ito, so I'll start with Junji Ito, and that would be Frankenstein, and the publisher is SSE or ECC, and of course I'm reading it again, so this is just a dust jacket, but the volume is pretty plain. And if you've read Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, that's what Junji Ito did here. He just adapted the novel. I will say it reads a lot faster because you don't get the narrative, and the art is very Junji Ito. I have to say I do like the way he did the creature. I think it's probably the best, for me, the best adaptation of or the best representation of the Frankenstein creation. And if you're not aware, Viz will be releasing it in October in a hardcover edition, like most of the Junji Ito stuff they're releasing now. I figured I would just go for the softcover by SSA. I mean, the story's going to be the same. I'm not going to have to deal with the sound effect changes that Viz likes to do. And I got it for a lot less because I think it was, what, maybe like $10, when most of the hardcovers for Viz are like 20 something like that. So I figured it was a good deal all the way around. And finally, another SSA publication, that is Bajo el Cielo como unos panties by Shun Umezawa. I have never heard of Umezawa, and I think he's kind of new. This is a single volume, which for some reason SSA decided to break up into 2 volumes. That's why it says uno, which is Spanish for one. And I guess the translation would be like a pair of panties under the sky. This came up as a recommendation through Amazon España, and I figured I'd check it out. I did Google Umezawa, and I really like this art style. And this, I would say, is kind of a culmination of what the Troublemakers started by Yoshimoto. This is a bunch of characters in the fringe. There's a lot of social commentary in the characters here. I don't want to show too much because it gets kind of racy and awkward at times. There's a story about school and what happens during school. You know, there's a lot of bad stuff going on. There's bullying, sex, drug use, and by the end of that story, it had a kind of weird ending. But I really enjoyed it. I'm not sure why SSA actually broke it down into 2 volumes. Maybe they figured it'd be better for the price. I'm not sure. I would have preferred a single volume. I guess now I have to look for numero dos. But yeah, that was the haul. Sorry for the lengthy video, and most likely for the awkward editing, but hopefully you stuck around till the end, and hopefully in 2 months you'll join me again. Thank you for watching.